I am truly thrilled to be here. Thank you guys for all coming here and being a part of this. I'm really pleased to introduce our next speaker who's going to give our keynote, Mr. Charles Eisenstein. Charles, where are you? Please come to the stage and let's hear from Charles.
All right, so happy to be here. Thanks for that introduction, Wes. I'm going to start by showing you a short film because it is the Coast Film Festival, like less than 3 minutes film. And it came about, I had this vision, this story in my head for a long time. And then I was with a bunch of musicians a couple years ago, and I told them the story. And I said, but I really need a soundtrack, and I was expecting some long process. But they were so in the feeling of the story that one of them said, well, let's just do it right now. And so the soundtrack you're going to hear took like 15 minutes for them to write. And magically, it exactly corresponded. I mean, maybe they had to do a little bit of tweaking, but it pretty much magically corresponded to the sequence of events in that film. And I just invoke that because I wonder if people here who are engaged in earth healing work have sometimes experienced the same thing, where events seem to arrange themselves according to a score that we're just beginning to learn to discern. So with that, I'll share the fall, and then I have a few more things to say. Yeah, don't you ever have the feeling like, what am I doing here on planet crazy, you know? Like, why would I volunteer for such a thing? And I think that we all have a sense that there's an answer to that question, that that question is not merely a cry of anguish, but that there's an answer to that. And that feeling is confirmed for me when I interact with others who are acknowledging and acting on the same feeling. That we're not here as punishment for something. We weren't cast into the pit of hell, but we took the leap because there's some way that we could contribute to the redemption of this earth. We recognize a potential for the healing of this planet. And that desire to serve that mission, as it grows stronger, nothing else is satisfying. No other distraction, no amount of the bribes of wealth or success or anything else will assuage the longing to fulfill the mission for which we are here. And so we feel this, I'm sure all of us on a personal level, but it also is now crystallizing on a collective level, where we're asking the question, not only for ourselves, but for humanity, why are we here? What is the purpose of a human being? This is what Wes was referring to when he talked about a new story of value, or you could even say he said a new grammar of values, a new set of values. And where do values come from? They come from the basic mythology that tells us what a human being is for and why we're here and where we came from and where we're going, what's important in life. It's a mythology, it's a story. Right now, our society is in what I call the space between stories, where we had an answer for that. A couple generations ago, everybody knew what was special about humans and why we were here. Everybody, at least in modern Western societies. We were here to conquer nature. We were here to rise above nature. We were here to harness the forces of nature. We were here to impose order and intelligence upon a world that had none of its own intrinsically. We were intelligence coming to creation to bring order to chaos. That was called progress. And we developed those powers to a great degree, promised and promising ourselves that once we had perfected those powers and achieved that mission of total dominance and total control and total mastery over nature, that we would be living in a utopia. We would be able to create a material and social utopia. And it would come through control. It would come through domination. Well, that story isn't working so well anymore. And its failure to bring any sort of health and well-being is propelling many, many people to ask these questions once again. What is a human being for and why are we here? And sometimes it seems that those questions have no answers, or that the answer seems impossibly remote to achieve. So a new story would say that we are not here to conquer and dominate life. We are here to serve life. We are here to participate in the continued unfolding of life and beauty on Earth. And like every species, we have a unique role to play in that sacred mission. That we are not nature's big mistake. That nature will not ultimately benefit the most by us stepping away from it because we're bad. But actually to participate in a new way, to become part of ecology and not an exception to ecology. To become participants in a larger intelligence than our own that actually unlocks far greater powers even than those that we have learned through our technology. But there's a catch. There's a sacrifice that must be made to unlock these greater powers. And the sacrifice is that of being in control. Obviously, if you're part of a larger intelligence, you're not in control of that intelligence. You're not in control of those synchronicities that put you at the right place at the right time in order to achieve things that you could not make a plan for how to achieve them. And there is, in fact, a stage of this journey where what you really want to achieve is impossible according to your rational mind, but you try anyway. Because something in you says, despite all of your reasons why, that it is not impossible. And I'm speaking especially to the young people here and anybody who still has that youth in their heart, that idealism that says a more beautiful world is possible and that says that I have a role to play in the manifestation of that more beautiful world. It's a sense of magnificence of your being. It doesn't have to look magnificent according to outside values of fame and money and the number of followers you have on social media. But it's an inner recognition that you're doing something important, crucial, in fact, even if nobody else recognizes it, even if it seems hopeless and futile. And it brings to mind, I'm not sure how many of you were at the Ecology Center last night, but Gary Benchengib, I'm not even sure how to pronounce his last name, but French guy who lives in Indonesia, and he made so the rivers are choked with plastic in Bali, in Java, like in many places many places on Earth actually, and he made this gorgeous film of their efforts to clean up some of these rivers, and they're going in there with wading boots, and they're picking out, like they're taking out the plastic bags, and ultimately they make furniture out of them. I mean, they're spending, I don't know how many thousands of hours, tens of thousands of hours, years, cleaning up just a few rivers on one of the thousands of islands of Indonesia. Meanwhile, total global plastic production is expected to, I don't know what the statistics are, Wes could probably tell you, double in some number of years. I don't know. I could make up some statistics, but you get the picture. And it seems futile to do that. And according to our learned understanding of how change happens in the world, it is futile. He doesn't have a plan to scale it. And if he told you his plan to scale it, you'd say, well, that's not even realistic. What about the petrochemical industry? What about the government? What about this? What about that? It's not realistic. Yet, something, even despite all of those voices, and you can map what I'm saying onto your own causes and concerns and your own psychology of I'm not doing enough, because I want to tell you something important. When you trust, like Gary has, this other knowledge that what you are doing is important, even if you can't explain it on global terms. You will be led along a path, a miracle path, that will bring results that you cannot predict or imagine. Some part of you understands that if the situation on Earth were impossible, you would not have made the leap into this world with all of those images in that film, all of the horrors unfolding on Earth. You would not have made the leap if you did not have a reason to do that. If the challenge were impossible, you would not have done this. Something in us knows that a more beautiful world is possible. Here's one way to look at it. When you listen to that voice and take the trash out of some rivers, because you care so much about healing those rivers, bringing beauty back to where it has been lost, bringing life, a lot of those rivers are dead, no fish in them even, bringing life back to where it has been lost. And you demonstrate your care with actions that aren't even, you don't even get any ego benefits from it. You don't even necessarily at first, you don't get celebrated for it, you don't get paid for it, you don't get to think that I'm saving the world for it. The only reason that you're doing it is because your love of life is pushing you to do it. That is a very powerful prayer. Whatever beings are watching us, when we do things like that in the face of obstacles, in the face of despair, in the face of darkness, when we do it anyway, that issues forth as a prayer that says, yeah, I'm serious about this. And you will find that it will open doorways to companionship and to hope. Because another way that that prayer operates, in those situations, whatever it is in your life, where no one's even watching, and you still act on your innate will to serve life and beauty on earth, you still do it. You are making a declaration to God about what a human being is. You are writing a new story. You are saying that even when there's nothing in it for me, still I serve life, humanity, beauty, love, kindness, compassion on earth. That is what a human being is. That is what you were saying in those situations. That is what a human being does in this situation. You're actually shifting reality into conformity with that new story. Because in the new story that is replacing the story of separation, I like to call it the story of reunion, the story of interbeing. A human being is no longer a separate self, seeking to maximize rational self-interest, in it for yourselves. That was the old story. In the old story, that's what a human being was. And you had to overcome that nature to be a good person, to be a civilized person. So war against the self was baked into the cake of that story. A constant struggle against your selfish nature. And then on a social, political level, that struggle manifests as control systems, as tyranny, as communism, as fascism, as high school. And we just get accustomed to being controlled and then rebelling against it in an everlasting holding pattern. But a new story, a story of reunion, a story of interbeing, says, no, that's not really what a human being is. That's what a human being becomes under certain circumstances. Circumstances of trauma, circumstances of scarcity, the artificially created scarcity of our economic system. That's what a human being becomes. put 10 people in a room with only enough food and water for 5 of them, and maybe they start fighting. And you say, yeah, see, human beings, terrible. Look at them fight, fighting for food. Well, what would it look like if you had enough food in the room? What if you didn't have systemic, endemic, artificial scarcity? What would we be? Anyway, the new story of a human being says, yeah, because we are not separate from each other, because we are not separate from nature, we're not here to simply serve the separate self, because we aren't a separate self. We are here with something to give to beyond ourselves. And somehow, that actually ends up serving the separate self too. And this is how the failure of our civilizational conceit is playing into the transition into a new story. Because, and maybe people have experienced this in their own lives too. You serve yourself, all for yourself, and you're still not happy. And then maybe you have a crisis. You have a health crisis, a marital crisis. Something happens that destroys the story that you were living in. And you open up to something beyond your own control. You become a person of service. And all of a sudden, all of the things that you thought you wanted, now you have their higher incarnation. You have the higher version of those things, the things that you actually wanted. Maybe you didn't really want everybody to like and respect you. Maybe you really wanted to like and respect yourself. Maybe you didn't want to control others. Maybe what you actually wanted was to feel secure, to feel at home in the world. And so, by a miracle, you realize you didn't have to control everything all along. I think that our civilization is nearing that point right now. Because the program of control, the story of separation, has not delivered the utopia that it had promised. What will happen? What kind of wealth will we discover when we reorient toward a new story that says that we are here to serve life? A new story that puts life at the center. A new story that understands, this is the theme of today's conference, that healthy humans and healthy planet are inextricably entwined. That when the soil is healthy, human beings are healthy. When other countries thrive, our country thrives. When any ecosystem is sick or dying, then something in ourselves sickens and dies as well. That we cannot build a wall to keep out all of the bad things and keep in all of the good things. That no wall will prevent, we can even make it political, the violence that we perpetrate abroad. Yeah, you might be able to build a wall and a surveillance system to keep out the terrorists, but can you keep out the domestic violence that seeps in under the wall? Can you keep out the civil violence, the violence in the streets, the violence in the home? No. And this is what we are learning. The wall of separation is crumbling now between humans and nature, between self and other. So this new story, as you can feel right now, is not just an intellectual construct. It's also a state of consciousness. It's a state of being. It feels different. And I would say, at least for myself, it's not a story that I can hold alone, because the environment that we have inherited, the society that we've inherited, the money system that we've inherited, the media system, the educational system, all of it constantly screams at us, separation, separation, separation. The economic system, for example, tells us every day that more for me is less for you. Tells us everybody's always trying to get the best deal. I do it too. I go on Amazon to buy something and there's 2 identical products, one of them is cheaper. You know, I will probably go for the cheaper one. Like, I'm doing it too. Do I think, well, I'd like this company to make a decent profit, so I'll buy the more expensive one? Like, that would make sense if we lived in community. If I actually care about that person, if we're connected. And so this is part of what I was referring to with this desire. Like, what is the desire underneath all of the consumption, all of the addiction? It's not that we're bad animals, bad human beings, if we're greedy, if we're obsessed with shopping and consumption and money and all that. Those are symptoms. Those are symptoms of the loss and the lack of what we're really hungry for, which is to be at home again in the world, to feel here again, to belong again. If we lived in a traditional village, in a hunter-gatherer tribe, in a peasant village somewhere, for example, then it would be very obvious to each one of us that the story of interbeing would be obvious, that your good fortune is my good fortune too, because we all depend on each other. Even in a traditional suburban neighborhood from like the 1970s, where I grew up, like, neighbors helped each other out all the time. You know, if you had a leaky roof, you didn't necessarily hire roofers. You know, you and the neighbors, okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, we had already lost most of this, even when I was a kid, but still, some of it, you know. If you had a neighbor who was talented, who had some skills, then like they would come over and help you, and you would help them, and everybody would kind of owe each other a favor. That's what a gift culture is like, and in that culture, it's obvious that your well-being is my well-being. Your good fortune is my good fortune, because now you'll have more to give, because what I see every day is people taking care of each other. And we don't have that in a money economy. Therefore, the spiritual understanding of our interconnection, the spiritual truth of what is good for you is good for me, what is good for the Amazon is good for me, what is good for you know, anybody on earth, any oppressed minority, anyone who's been on the margins, you know, is good for me too, and then my well-being cannot be complete if others are in a bad state. That is not obvious. We have systems to deny that truth, but we didn't used to have that. It used to be up close and personal. If the ecosystem was failing, then that you would suffer too. You couldn't just import pristine food from Iceland or something. We have systems that obscure this basic spiritual truth, but they do not cancel that truth. We may not, as was true of people thousands of years ago, we may not die if our local ecosystem dies. Something in us will die, though. But yeah, this is, I guess I would get onto a whole another topic about the environmental movement and what motivates it. Ultimately, though, it cannot be fear for the bad things that'll happen to us. The felt dimension of the story of interbeing, the story of reunion, the new story, the story that says that you and I are not really separate. There's a word for that felt dimension. It's called love. Love is the direct feeling that your happiness is my happiness, that your pain is my pain. It's the felt recognition of interconnection. And so we're gathered here, and we're going to hear so many other beautiful examples of people acting on this impulse, acting on this new story. That will remind us that, yeah, I'm not crazy for listening to that also. I'm not crazy for trusting that voice. I'm not crazy for believing that the invisible things that I am doing that are not celebrated and not rewarded are actually important. And that a more beautiful world is possible. And that I am put here on earth to contribute something unique to that. And if I have not found what it is, that is my purpose in life right now, to find that, to grow that, to know that, and to see it not only in myself, but in others, to know that of them, that I can then call it forth from the way I talk to them, even the way I see them. It says, I know why you are here. I know what a human being is. I have proven it to myself that this is why I am here, and I see it in you too. And thereby, we become a walking invitation to each other to step into a new story, and that's how we hold it together. So I offer that as my blessing and my hope for this gathering. And thank you for your attention, and have a great time.